Today, the long and the short of longevity. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Today I'm joined by Tim Fuller from Nucleus Wealth. Hi Tim.
G'day Martin, how you going?
Yeah, pretty good. Yourself?
Not too bad today. Another big topic, longevity, not always the easiest thing to think about, but hopefully we can give the audience a few pointers.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's picking up from the earlier show. I'll put a link above, which sort of outlined the overall thinking about how to plan and, financial planning and into retirement and all those things. But you then said you'd come back and talk in more detail at a more granular level, and we're going to pick longevity today. And I guess we should start with just what we mean by longevity to start with.
Absolutely. Yeah, so look, I guess longevity is somewhat of a thorny topic, I guess, for most people, but it is a crucial component of ensuring that you have the wherewithal through your retirement, and don't run out of money, simply put. For most people, and I kick off in the article, just sort of talking about how if fruit and vegetables tasted like bacon, we'd all probably live a lot longer. A bit of a joke just to sort of get a thorny topic up and away. But the point of that is really to say, well, look, you don't have to think long and hard about it, but it is worthwhile just giving it some thought in order to put a bit of a wrapper around, your own life expectancy and that of your partners perhaps as well. And of course, that's a crucial component then in the timeframes for in how you invest and how long your money's going to last in retirement.
And that's really important, right? Because actually longevity, of course, has been growing over the last decades, right? So people today are likely to live into greater old age, hopefully more healthy old age as well. But nevertheless, the fact is that as the years tick by and you've saved this amount of money to start with, you're eating away. And the question is, have you got sufficient to cover you through the duration of your life, bearing in mind, of course, that there will be a series of unexpected events and financial commitments required through that retirement journey?
Well, that's right. A big part of the whole piece and removing some of the uncertainty is really around is having that sort of endpoint sort of piece. And of course, anything can happen, and you've got to be flexible with these things as well. But it's nice to have a bit of a start. I kick off by just sort of talking around some different ways that you can quantify, I guess, that longevity piece for yourself. Personal factors, or looking at your own family history, of course, is a big one. Now, as you mentioned, though, what got people, a generation or two ago, may have actually been ruled out now, which is a wonderful thought, and it just goes to show both the Australian lifestyle and the way that we are actually, living longer now. But of course, what that can mean as well is you need more money to support yourself in those later years. The interesting thing there, I guess, from there is that, you can look at your own family tree, and of course, people, if you've got relatives that have died of natural causes, it's not a bad place to start. And I sort of dropped in there, Carlton great coach David Parkin always said that, find out what your grandfather and your father died of, and then try not to let that happen to you. And, that's a pretty good place to begin. But I guess on top of that as well, there are a number of industry opportunities as well. So the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the ABS, releases life tables, which can be pulled apart at a state level and also at a national level. And look, if you've got nothing else to go on, that can be not a bad position to sort of go, okay, well, given everything, given the way that the country's run at the moment and the way the health systems are, I'm expected to live till an age of, say, 85, 87 or whatever it is. So look, it's just about having that number, which then, crucially then builds into the investment side and obviously where the money's going to come from to support you in retirement.
The point there, of course, is that's a statistical average, right? But unfortunately, not everybody lands in the middle, right? So, you might be earlier, but you might be a lot later, and there are people quite often now getting up into their 90s and some even hitting the ton, right? And the question is, would your finances be able to support you for the next 40 years or so? Of it's a big conundrum, right? And of course, part of the other issue here is when you move into retirement, quite often there's a bit of a temptation to go grab a bunch of capital and splurge it on holidays and the new car, etc., right? Which may make perfect sense in terms of lifestyle and what things you want to do. But you've always got this question about, do I spend now? Do I save for later? Right? And then the other side of it is, well, actually, what is retirement saving for? Is it meant to be to provide you with effectively the life that you want over your future? Or is it to leave a legacy for the next generation, right? And that leads to a whole bunch of family conflicts as well. So this is a big thorny issue.
Look, it really is, and I'll get a lot more into the lifestyle and expenditure piece in our next show, in the next L in the series. But looking back at the longevity side of things, look, you're right. People are living longer, and the averages can certainly indicate to you, or I should say, start as a bit of a basis point for your own perhaps tweaking as well. So if you're looking at your your parents or your grandparents' sort of age when they passed away, or if they have passed away, then you've got to go, okay, well, maybe they worked in a dangerous environment, maybe they smoked, maybe they did a number of things that aren't particularly relevant in my life, and so therefore you can be a little bit more comfortable that you're probably on the northern side of the average as opposed to the southern side of the average. And then it's really, and once again, you don't want to dwell too much on this, but it's about saying, okay, well, look, I've given it some thought, and that's the crucial thing. And so therefore I've got some confidence behind that number. So then when you go forth and you go and have a look at the financial side, you've then got confidence in the outcome of the equation or of the projections as well. So look, it's an interesting one, but it's certainly something I think that people should spend a bit of time in quantifying, and maybe not too much time, but just enough to figure out a number, and then they can get started on the rest of it.
And so, what do you recommend? From a planning perspective, do you sort of pick that median number, or do you say scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3? I mean, how do you try and sort of turn that into something that's useful?
Yeah, look, great question. So, look, there's a number of different ways. Some people I've spoken to in the past had a very good idea of their own mortality, and they basically said, righto, look, I want to make sure I've got X amount of dollars to enjoy myself up until this point, and then after that, essentially my health will potentially deteriorate to the point where I want to enjoy the money earlier rather than later. And of course, this is all really good information when you're putting together these models for people. Others, they don't really know, so you just take the take the average, if you like, and as you say, you go, okay, well, middle of the ground is maybe the ABS figure for their state, and then go, okay, scenario 1 might be that things finish up a little bit earlier, and then scenario 2 obviously in the middle, and then scenario 3 might be best or worst case scenario. How you think about it is that you end up cracking the triple digits and making sure that you've got money there. Now, interestingly though, on that point, often in my experience, you find that particularly people when they're sort of in their 80s and 90s, the amount of money that they need is dramatically different to and less to the earlier stages of retirement, for a lot of good reasons. Obviously, you're more active, you're getting around, you're overseas holidays when and if we ever are able to go on those again, are more relevant to them. We're in the in the later stages of life. It's it's a simpler life, and you don't have as many costs to worry about. And crucially as well, obviously, is the implementation or inclusion of the old age pension, which, obviously is there in the background for most people. It's a terrific social safety net that this country has. And you do actually find, in my experience, particularly in the much later stages of life, it gets to a point where they're actually banking some of the old age pension as well. So it just goes to show, the level of expenditure in those stages of life.
Right. But on the other hand, you also can have much higher healthcare costs, right? And
Yes.
what you find often is that the costs of healthcare go through the roof, other costs come down, but now the net might be that you actually end up spending a bit less than perhaps you are used to spending now. I guess the other side of it, it depends a bit on what we think inflation is going to do and what we think the economy is going to do and how much things are going to cost, right? Because, if you had inflation like it was in the 80s when it was, 10, 15%, that would be a very different story to the current growth or inflation rates of, not much at all.
Look, that's right. And that's unfortunately, you've got a lot of unknowns in the retirement planning space. Obviously, what we're speaking about today, the longevity piece, which you can, in a way, you can zero in a little bit on, and the more a person thinks about it, the easier that one is, and the more confidence you have behind the figure. Things like inflation, that's an interesting one, isn't it? As we know, we're in a period now where inflation's low, and is it going to remain low? There's a lot of conjecture around, but I think it's probably always the better solution is to have a bit of a look at inflation in a long run sense, and then maybe just add a little bit, because what it's doing is it's putting fat into in the overall projection, and it means that if inflation, for example, undershoots, then you're on the right side of it.
Fair enough. Well, look, this is all about good assumptions, isn't it? It's all about, you need to think about these things. You need to make some assumptions. It won't be perfect, but it's better than not making any assumptions and therefore not doing any planning and not doing any thinking about what's in the future, right? Because that's the recipe for having no control over your financial future or anything else. So it's important to understand the limitations of it, but also to make sure that you do actually do some thinking. And the starting point is, okay, so X marks the spot today. How long is this runway going to be? And what? How many years is that? And what's the implication? I mean, it's a scary but really important place to start the conversation, isn't it?
Look, it is, but there's a number of things that you can build into it as well. It's not just trying to madly push together the biggest pile that you can, retire, and then, just hope for the best that, the mechanics of the stock market and, inflation risks and all these sort of things aren't going to leave you high and dry at some point in the future. Another little piece that I sort of worked in there as well was having the idea of a career after your career, if you will. And that's another piece in the planning, maybe just when you're saying you're fleshing out what your retirement might look like. And, thinking about working after you're supposed to be retired is probably not something that jumps to mind for many people. But in this country in particular, you are actually quite tax sheltered. There's a number of seniors tax offsets which raise your tax-free threshold, for example, which means that you can do or look to do some part-time work in your retirement. And for some people, it probably doesn't sound palatable at the moment, but getting something, and look, it's quite a large amount. You can get sort of north of 30,000 earning before you start paying income tax, which at the end of the day alleviates the drawdown of your super retirement money. And so, if you're looking at, say, 50,000 required per year, if you're drawing down 50,000 from your retirement savings, is a big hit for most people. Whereas if you're supplementing, say, 20 or 30,000 by doing some part-time work that you potentially enjoy, then of course you're potentially halving the amount that you're drawing down on your super, which is going to extend it out a long way. And those are the sort of things where planning for those post-career careers can be important in the lead up to retirement, because it means that you're not stepping into the unknown. You've got some confidence around potential income sources. Now it might be the same line of work, and consultancy is a commonly trodden path for many people in professional parts of the world. It may not be. It may be just purely kicking off in a completely new area that you always wanted to, and it needed a bit of extra training, or you've got to do some education work, which you might be able to tick off while you're actually in your pre-retirement stage. And it's just about firming up income sources that aren't going to just necessarily mean you're relying holistically on your retirement savings, and then obviously shortening its potential. So. And then just finally, I guess, and this is probably obviously not financially driven, but looking at things like volunteering, and this is probably going back to the personal longevity side as well, where getting involved in the community, getting human interaction or social interaction back. Quite a lot of people have social interaction at work, and then when work finishes, a big component of their personal life can fall away. And I've seen very successfully a lot of people that have gone into retirement that have then started looking at the multitude of different volunteering opportunities that are around, and they're actually, then rebuilding or building a social network in that regard, often with great quality people who also like volunteering. So, you can't speak highly enough of people that are happy to do that. But these are the sort of things that actually help your longevity, because, time and time again, you see when people finish work, they almost set a timer on speeding up the second part of their life, or the final part of their life, because they're missing a number of factors, and you've got to try and get those back. So
I think that's a very important observation. And look, I've got to the point, I'm over the hill, right? So, but I'm.
I wouldn't say that, Martin. Come on.
but
you're one of the hardest working guys I know.
But look, I do this because I really enjoy doing it, right? So I left my mainstream job some years ago when it was mostly, frankly, large organisation politics stuff, right? I mean, I did do a bit of consulting, but now I'm doing the things I want to do and love doing and enjoy doing. So I get huge personal satisfaction from doing something that I want to do. I don't have to do it to the same concentration that I did, although I'm tending to, because I love it so much. But the point is, it gives you that segue, right? And I think that's really important. So, thinking about what are the other things that I'm going to do beyond the point of retirement is really critical, right? So it should be not just a sort of a drop off a cliff and do nothing. It should be a taper and a controlled migration. That all takes thinking, though. It just doesn't happen, right? And I know a number of people who basically got to the end of their working life and the cliff is there, and they then have to try and pick themselves up and say, okay, now what do I do, right? Whereas if actually they'd laid a bit of planning ahead of time, they could have actually managed that transition, because that transition is a really big deal.
Oh, look, absolutely. And there's so many different facets of the volunteering and community sort of space that no doubt the skills that you use every day in your current career pre-retirement are somewhat applicable, and you can be a tremendous impact on the other side as well. And that's, it's going back to that, essentially that planning or that navel gazing piece of saying, okay, well, when I finish up this, 9-to-5 job or whatever it is, more often than not, more than that, if that just immediately stopped in the future, then, what's the rest of my life going to look like? And, where can I do things now that are, as you say, going to prevent that cliff? The other one as well, actually, is quite interesting, is the idea of the transition to retirement. And obviously this is quite employer centric, and it can really depend on where you work and how you work. But dropping back to a few days a week, which is essentially the same as getting those lower income jobs or part-time jobs anyway, and sort of doing that transition piece, and then that way you are sort of getting half a week of quasi-retirement and still getting some money in the door and not having to draw down on your savings. So, look, I guess the key takeaway is there's lots of different paths. It shouldn't be a scary thing, but as you say, it just requires a little bit of consideration, and of course, there's always professional help from the financial side to shore up that projection and calculation piece as well.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, I appreciate your comments today, and we'll put a link to the article, which is, I think, well worth a read. And, it's never too early to start thinking about this stuff, not to be morbid, but just to be realistic about the future. There are choices, there are options, there are also various forms of advice that, you can go get as well. And of course, the Nucleus Wealth and what the Wealth Funds are part of the story once you've got that contextual piece wired up.
Well, that's right. Yeah, and I sort of finished off my article just with a little bit of a financial investment sort of takeaway, just for those that perhaps are a little bit closer or in retirement, and this article's, or this show's piqued your interest. And just a commonly trodden approach is what they call the bucket approach, where you start segmenting out the amount of money that you've got, and then applying risk to sort of take advantage of growth markets, but also, of course, secure a certain number of years as well. So it's well worth a read, I think, for people that are in that position. They're comfortable in perhaps the investment space, or they know what they're doing, but they just want a little bit of help with some strategy for retirement, and take it from there. But always happy to chat to. Have we settled on the Wanderers? What's our collective for the Walk the World fellowship?
Well, I think the Wanderers seems to have landed as one thing. So at the moment, it's the Walk the World Wanderers.
I'm happy with that. I think it was fairly widely accepted in the comments as well. But if there's anyone else has got anything there, I'm always happy to chat to your audience. There's always some wonderful topics that come out, particularly at the moment, and there's a lot going on in the world, and people are reaching out, which is wonderful.
And I will just say, the beauty of what you offer is, a direct point of contact with yourself, but also the ability then to sort of push them on to various different advice forms, depending on what they need, right? And I find that when I talk to a lot of my people in the one-to-one sessions, their real question is, who do I go to find the right route for getting the right advice, right? So in a way, I regard you as a bit of a sort of a traffic cop as well.
Well, you could probably say that. Look, I'm happy to wear that. Look, being in the space that you are, where you do get a lot of what we sort of call greenfield interests, where people they've got a rough idea that they need help, but they don't know where to start. I think reaching out to us to have a chat around those initial things is a great step. Certainly doesn't hurt. There's no obligation in any way, and obviously we're linked in with some terrific independent advisors as well, which are always happy to make referrals to for the broader and more thorough work that we don't do online through Nucleus Wealth.
Yeah, Tim, I appreciate that. And probably down the track, I might try and get hold of some of those independent advisors and get some more direct perspective from that perspective as well, because I think it's a really important conversation. This landscape is a bit complicated, but it is navigable if you start the journey and take it step by step. I'll look forward to your next L in one of your next shows, right? Because there's 2 more to do. So I'll look forward to coming back and having another chat with that later on.
Wonderful, Martin. Yeah, no, looking forward to it. I think it'll be a good series, and there's plenty to get to, pretty of information to pass on and for people to get something out of.
Terrific, Tim. Thanks for your time once again, and we'll chat again soon. Take care.
All the best. Thanks, Martin. Cheers.